And what is up, everyone? I am Joe DeHoyos. I'm host of Beyond the Woodline. Real quick before we get started, for those of you guys who are interested, you may know that I am part of the JRG, which stands for the Jevning Research Group. It's headed up and founded by Mr. William Jevning. He's got like 50 years plus experience in this field. He was friends with Renee Hendon and John Green. Two of the guys are considered the pioneers in the Bigfoot world when it comes to research. We've got teams in New York State, Maine, Delaware, Florida, Ohio, Oklahoma, Louisiana, of course, here in Texas, where I'm at, New Mexico, California, Oregon. So if you're interested in joining the team, shoot me a message. We'll get you started. Uh, Even if there's a team in your state already, you can start your own team. We're happy with that. Um, if you want to meet up with someone, we always ask that you research them, right? Research the researchers, what we always say. Anyone that we put you up with, we will vet them and we will vet you as well. Just because unfortunately, there are some crazy people in this world. And with all that being said, I know you guys don't tune in to hear me ramble all night long. Um, I've got with me tonight Mr. Pete Ghrist. How you doing, Pete?
How you doing, Joe? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, thanks a lot. And oh, real quick, I didn't give out my email. It's beyond.woodline@gmail.com for anyone who's interested in joining the team, or even if you just have some suggestions or some guests you want me to have on. But yeah. So, Pete, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you started into this crazy world that we're, of the paranormal that we're in?
Well, again, my name's Pete Ghrist. I am director of Northwest Indiana Paranormal and the Griffith High School Paranormal Society. I'm also a cast member of hopefully a show that you're going to be hearing about more soon called History Alive through DMZ Productions. I got everything all started up back probably like a kind of a scary situation when I was about 20 years old, and I had a room that was kind of sectioned off in the basement after my grandfather had passed away. We were over living there and kind of helping take care of him when he was in hospice. And after he had passed away, one night I went to sleep and my covers started getting pulled off of me straight from like the bottom of the bed. And it was just kind of a terrifying situation. And I ran upstairs. But then after that, it was kind of like that adrenaline rush, after that happened, that I was kind of like, wow, it was a really cool feeling. It was scary as hell, but it was a great feeling. So I kind of like wanted to read into that and kind of find out what was going on there. So I started watching some of the shows. Paranormal State was a big show for me. I really liked watching that because back in the day, I didn't have any equipment. Paranormal State, they really didn't really use a lot of equipment, maybe some flashlights and some cameras, and they usually had a medium with them. But for the most part, it was kind of, just people going on their intuitions and watching and listening for things to happen. So watched that for a long time and everything, but I really still didn't have a team. And then about 2012, I went on a chaos tour at the Old Lake County Jail where Dillinger escaped from in 1934. I went there in 2012, went on a public hunt. I just was hooked after that. So, and that's the same story that a lot of people say. They go on one public hunt and then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I'm totally hooked. I'm a school resource officer in Griffith, Indiana, police officer there. And what ended up happening is the school I work at, Griffith High School, we ended up, me and one of the teachers, Jenna Parker, we ended up going out on our own, going and we'd bring another person, Casey Verity, with us sometimes, and we would go different places and just do ghost hunting, maybe in the woods or cemetery, stuff like that. And then we come back to school. She's a history teacher and things like that. So students would end up like, we'd kind of talking about it with people and stuff like that. They'd be like, oh, I wish we could go with you. And like, yeah, that's probably not going to happen, obviously. And then all of a sudden I'm like, you know what, maybe we could do a club. So we talked to the principal. It's heavy on history, which is very important. It's 90% of it for me, is the history. And I wrote it all up and they approved it. And so the Griffith High School Paranormal Society started in 2013. Since that time, it is by far the most popular club in the school. This year, we had almost 110 students in it. Um, each year, it's over 90 to 100. Just keeps getting more and more popular. Um, it's open it's completely inclusive for any student that goes to Griffith High School. So uh, they just uh, we have about 12 to 15 people go on each trip. We'll go some places like several times to get everybody in. But parents come along, teachers come along, and so they learn about the history. Then we do a ghost hunt for about 2 hours, investigation, and then they donate out of their own. We give them a suggested donation, but it's all on them to donate, and they always do. So over that period, we have gone on close to 200 investigations since then.
Jeez.
Field trips, close to 200. I drive the bus, and we take them there, and we've donated over $6,000 to local historical sites. They also do community service. We put, like, a couple weeks ago, some of them came with us. We went on put flags on the graves of American soldiers for Memorial Day weekend. We've been on Windy City Live in Chicago, Channel 7, with that on their Halloween episode. But I'm extremely proud of those students. They've got a huge heart for history, huge heart for restoration. This year, we're looking for next school year, we're looking to get into headstone restoration. So that'd be something that they could learn how to do that as well. But about 2018, in the middle of that, there was a lot of parents that were saying, I wish we could go a little bit farther, than we always stay like an hour, hour and a half away. And so Northwest Indiana Paranormal was started. And that group has gone on close to about 100 investigations since then. We've been Ohio, Wisconsin, Kentucky, Illinois, obviously Indiana. And we're looking to get out to Pennsylvania and Kansas next year. So it's a lot of fun. We love, how it is. You go out of town, do a little road trip with people. But that group is also heavy, even heavier on community service. Like to go to old speakeasies, clean up old jails, things like that. It's all about promoting the continued restoration and operation efforts of the places we visit.
Yeah, dude, that sounds awesome, man. I wish we had something like that going on here. Um, and I've always thought about doing something like that, like in the Bigfoot world, seeing if I could get, any youngsters wanting to come along and do that. So yeah, that's pretty cool that that you're able to do that. I bet that's a lot of fun. And I know you said you had parents, of course, that went along with you, but overall, what's the feedback been from parents in general?
Oh, it's overwhelmingly positive. Obviously there are some parents, that say, I'd rather not my student not,
Yeah.
participate in something like that. But it's, again, it's stressed heavily on the history part,
Mhm.
actually learning about those locations and stuff like that. So when we kind of like leave it on their own for, whatever people believe, we're not getting in a circle and chanting or doing anything
Right.
like
Yeah.
that. We don't mess with Ouija boards with that group,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. It's more about going there, learn about the history. Then when we leave, I always make the same joke every single time we get on the bus. I always go, all right, I counted everybody, but who's the extra guy in the back with the top hat on? Let's drive the bus, because they know it's coming.
Right.
The same joke
Yeah.
every single
The
time.
same joke. Yeah. Hey, it never gets old though. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we just always say, hey, you guys got to stay here. You can't follow us, this
Mm.
and that. But it's not anything where people are getting sage out and doing things like everybody is just expected to do what they want on their own and what they believe.
So, from a historic perspective, what's the coolest place you think you've been to?
Historic perspective,
Yeah. Yeah.
it would probably be a cross between Old Lake County Jail and uh, probably actually a sad story. The old Benton County Jail, which is in Fowler, Indiana. That was my absolute favorite place to go.
Yeah.
Actually, when we filmed our pilot for History Alive, it was actually part of it was filmed there along with the Fowler Theater. But that jail was built in 1876, and it has this huge history with they had somebody who had murdered a 15-year-old girl, and he was put in there, and then 100 vigilantes on horseback came there and removed him from the jail, and then took him to her house, and they hung him in the woods and things like that.
Wow.
It's like it was just this like very, very, you know, cool story that we followed. And so we actually went over there and found where the house was and talked to the family members, got really, really into it, found graves, actually researched it, found a picture of Jacob Nelling hanging in the tree,
Oh
in
wow.
an old family album. Just found, ran across it when one of our group members was in a historical society in Fowler. So it was really, really cool to be able to follow up on that. And we
Mhm.
loved going there and cleaning up. But then, unfortunately, the county commissioners just all of a sudden decided that they were going to tear it down this year,
Hmm.
which is terrible. It's just
Oh, yeah.
absolutely unnecessary. They want to turn it into like a parking lot. There was 700 signatures that we got, asking people to find somewhere else to do this and to leave it, and they just they wouldn't listen. They just, oh well, we don't care. We're tearing it down.
Yeah.
So just a real shame. That's going to be a lost piece of history. But that was
Yeah.
my favorite.
Yeah, and Wade says headstone restoration is such a worthy cause. Unlike just saying hello during an investigation, you are providing integration for their life. Yeah, and I like that too. Yeah.
Absolutely. One of the the cemeteries that we go to, I like to take the kids to. It actually has a Revolutionary War grave, and so we bring them there, and then we look at the actual. I'm like, when was that person born? And they were actually 9 years old when the Revolutionary War started.
Oh
And then when
wow.
it ended, they were around 15. And then
Yeah.
so I'll be like, look at that, guys. Look at that. That person was between 9 and 15 years old, fighting at the time the most powerful military in the world,
Yeah.
for our freedom. And you guys sometimes have trouble getting out of bed in the morning to go to school. You know what I mean? So I mean, but you can see tears in the eyes of these kids while they're sitting there, and we're talking about it. Um, it's a very, very moving place. So you're very right about the tombstones. We need to make sure that we maintain that for the next generation so that they can read them, and the next generation can do it, and so that they can read them. It's
Yeah.
just very, very important, especially for our veterans.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with that. I think our history to this country is very important. When you talk about the Revolutionary War, Civil War, stuff like that. Like uh, here in Texas, we've got this long range from San Antonio, just east of Texas, which is San Jacinto. I mean, east of Houston, San Jacinto. This I don't know, probably 400 miles worth of battle that took place. It's all these battles that took place along the way. There's a bunch of like these smaller cemeteries that people just don't know about. You know, and there are groups here in Texas that go out and find these little cemeteries and and pay tribute to these guys. No matter what
Yeah,
side you were on, they died. You know,
no, exactly. And I mean, that's another reason. Like when we go places, we like to just drive,
Mhm.
because then you're driving and all of a sudden, hey, what is that? Oh, it's a cemetery.
Mhm.
Let's stop and just look around. So you can just stop. You're not flying overhead, so you can actually pull over, walk into the cemetery, and a lot of times we'll run across something where it's like, man, somebody needs to take a look at this. Like there's things that are knocked over, things like that, and then you can actually get a hold of like a trustee's office or something and be like, hey, somebody needs to go out there and look at those things because it's been vandalized,
Yeah.
things like that. So, or maybe it's something that we can look at for a future project. But I'm all about like following like the line of history stories. So it's my sister used to live like 2 hours south of me in this town called Covington, just this old town. And there was a right up on a hill. There was actually cemetery up on the hill. And way in the back corner was this very ornate, and it's still there, very ornate, very well maintained uh, headstone that says Juliet on it. She died, Juliet Rogers, and she died in 1849. It said wife of Elijah Rogers. So, but it had all this music, notes, looking things like that on it, and everything. And we're like, man, she was only like 27 years old when she
Yeah.
died. Well, then you start to like think about that person. You're like, man, I'm going to find out more about her.
Mhm.
But we couldn't really find anything right away about her, probably because she died so young. You're
Yeah.
not going to find any pictures back then, 1840s. But then on a whim, we're driving through Covington down a side street, going through these woods, and all of a sudden there's a red brick house, like one of those Italianate looking houses, and we go up there, and it has a block on the side that says "Former Home of Elijah Rogers," and we're like, "Wow, there we are." So then we go and start talking to those people, and they're like, "Oh, he's buried up there on the hill." Go up on the hill. There's his gravestone with his new wife, the second wife, and then you could actually see his house from the headstone. So he picked that place to be buried because it overlooked his home. And so you just start to follow everything with that, and it turns into, okay, well, yeah, he did have a child, and
Yeah.
it was actually 10 feet away from Juliet's grave. So we just really get into actually following up on a story.
Yeah.
It's just very, very interesting for us, and that's what the show is about as well.
Mhm. That's pretty cool, man. When you were talking about, he says, what state are we discussing?
That's Indiana. It's Fowler, Indiana, is where the old Benton County Jail is. That was, and then the old Lake County Jail is in Crown Point, Indiana.
When you mentioned that cemetery getting turned into a parking lot, there's actually a parking lot here in Texas, right outside of Houston. I think it's called Spring or Spring Branch, just right outside of Houston. It's actually a parking lot with some graves in it, and it's roped off. Well, not roped off, but it's got a chain link fence around it, and it's in the parking lot. There's a sidewalk, and then there's a main street right there. I need to find a picture of that and post it. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. But yeah, there's a cemetery in a parking lot. Uh, it's pretty crazy. And
Yeah,
uh,
it's amazing that you'll when you find those, that they're really, really old because they built up everything around them. you know. So I mean, we have a mire in a nearby place called Maryville that's nearby us. There's a mire, and across the street from it is like some plumbing company, and right next to the driveway, there's two headstones that are there that are from like 1820s and 1850s, and it's a whole family that died of like some sort of like a type of plague back in that time. So like the dad was the only one who stayed alive. All of his kids, his mom or the mother, everything, they all passed away and they were all buried there. And then he eventually died and they buried him as well. And it's just somebody's made the point to make sure, okay, I own this property, but I'm going to keep these two headstones up there. And that's very commendable.
And Bobby says his grandparents lived in Crown Point, Indiana.
Oh, yeah. Crown Point is just a phenomenal city, just an absolutely phenomenal city. It's just very, very well maintained. When you go to the square, they have a courthouse that was built in 1878, and they've absolutely kept it exactly the way that it was up to a point. Now you can do weddings and stuff like that there, but they had that was kept there, and then down the street, eventually in 1923, they actually built. I'm sorry, 1927, they actually built another government, like a justice complex that was right next to the old Lake County Jail. And there was actually like a bridge that went in between them so they could take inmates back and forth to be able to go to court without having to take them outside. And that's what they did with John Dillinger. He was actually arraigned in that courtroom.
Oh wow!
So last weekend, myself and a bunch of volunteers, including three of the History Alive cast, Kara Phillip and Jamie Stidham and Amelia Cotter. They came out there to to help out. And Jamie even drove all the way up here from Kentucky, which was amazing. But they had two family members of that were the nephew and the great nephew of John Dillinger that were there. So we were able to sit there and talk to them about how their efforts to try to exhume John's body, because they, we need to make sure that through a DNA test that that's going to be him in that grave. So it's just fascinating to talk to them. They've done all these digs in the back of the Mooresville house. They found a map at the back of the property that they believe will lead them to some buried money that John Dillinger might have put in there. But they told us a lot of really, really cool stuff. Really, really nice people. And one of them actually is a Marion County deputy now, which is Marion County is about Indianapolis. So it's pretty cool that his great nephew ends up being a law.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. So, what about some of the spookiest places that you've been to? Have you been to any places that like sent those chills down your spine?
Well, I would say probably the most active location that I've ever been to would be the Monroe House in Hartford City, Indiana. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but you've heard of it. It's by like Muncie, by Ball State University, just a little bit north of there. And I mean, I've been there 7 times, and my girlfriend, a shaman actually told her, every time you go there, you leave a portion of yourself there when you leave. And I was like, wow, but when you go in there, you feel it. I mean, it's like you feel like you're on a boat, kind of. It's kind of like everything's kind of rolling with the land. And then they actually found a skeleton of a teenage boy buried in the crawl space a couple of years ago. Nick Groff and Katrina Weidman did live on taped on an episode of their show when they were investigating in the house. So, but that place is one of those ones that baby monitors get knocked off the tables. You could hear growls, like audible growls. Things will come through baby monitors and radios and things with people that are talking, saying things like that. People will end up getting scratched. You hear doors shutting, and we've got video evidence of a door slamming inside of there. So that place is probably like the most probably like things that you might see like on a horror movie, things that you might see on like like one of the Paranormal Activity shows. But probably like the coolest one with activity is probably the Roth House in Illinois. I don't know if you've heard of the Watseka Wonder. And
No.
in Watseka, Illinois, they have the Roth House. It was the first documented place of spiritual possession. So there was a girl named Mary Roth that lived there, that lived in that area with her family. And she started having all sorts of seizures, things like that. And she ended up dying. And her parents built that house and essentially to channel her spirit. So they were spiritualists. They started having all these seances all the time inside of the house, trying to contact their dead daughter. And then all of a sudden, across town, this girl started having the same seizures. And she claimed that she was now Mary Roth. So Mary Roth was coming into this girl named Lorancy Venom, who lived all the way across town and didn't even know who these people were. I mean, keep in mind, this is the 1870s. So this is during a time where, nobody really knew their neighbors and things like that, unless they lived right next to them. So they actually, in order to try to cure what was going on with Lorancy, they moved her into the house with the Roths. And she actually knew everything about their dead relatives, could recognize all of Mary's things. So it was definitely one of those things where, people were perplexed, and they had a doctor that actually wrote and documented everything that was going on with it. So after 100 days, Lorancy gave and told them that she was going to give the body back to Lorancy. So eventually they were able to say goodbye when they weren't able to say goodbye before. So it's actually a story of healing as well,
Yeah.
because these parents didn't have an opportunity to say goodbye to their daughter before, and now they were able to do that, even though it was somebody else's child that was occupied by their daughter's spirit.
Hmm.
It's very fascinating.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever heard anything quite like that. I've heard of like reincarnation or stuff like that. I've never heard that. That's pretty wild.
It's a beautiful house too. They've completely restored it. I mean, it used to have light bulbs hanging around inside and everything on strings. A guy named John Whitman, he's actually won an award for what a great job he did restoring it. And so now you can go and you can visit it. It's an Airbnb. You can rent a room in there. You could stay in Lorancy's bedroom if
Huh.
you want to. Um, but it's definitely a great place to visit. I highly recommend it. It's got a lot of activity. But you got to think of it, for years and years and years, people were doing, seances in there, trying to contact, and they might have contacted other things that might have come by there as
Right.
well, in the process before they were able to get a hold of Mary.
Mhm. The house that I lived in before I moved into this place, we've only been here 2 months. Um, my neighbor one time came up to me and he's like, I saw him at the grocery store, and he's like, "Hey," he goes, "You ever have anything strange happen in your place?" I'm like, "No." He says, "The people that lived there before you," he goes, "they would always invite us over to go and take part in their seance."
Oh,
So like,
really?
yeah, yeah. He said they always had a seance, like once a month they would have a seance. And I said, well, either they didn't know what they were doing and they didn't open anything, or they knew what they were doing and they closed everything right. So yeah.
How old's your house?
That other house, it was very old. It was probably built in the 70s.
Oh,
Yeah. Well,
really?
yeah, like the 1970s. Yeah. So it's been around quite a while. Yeah, I didn't know that. But that was pretty
The
crazy.
The house I live in is a Sears house. You ever heard of the Sears houses? You could actually order it from Sears Roebuck, and they would bring, they would send all the parts of the house, and, and then people would build their own house out of it. So my house was built in 1914, um,
Wow.
and yeah, and they did a great job with it. My basement never floods. Knock on wood. I barely ever lose power. A guy named William Grimmer and Veronica Austin, his wife, they actually are the ones who built it. And got a lot of really cool pictures of them sitting on the porch. There's a
Hmm.
rose bush that she built, or that she planted, and it's
Hmm.
still every year it sprouts every year right
Wow.
next to the front. But the thing is they had 13 children that were raised in the house, and two of them didn't survive childhood.
Oh.
So their funerals supposedly were in my living room.
Hmm. Oh, I believe it.
So yeah, I would believe it back then. I believe they passed away in like the 20s, and one of them passed away in the early 40s. But we actually hear the sound of like bare feet running on the original hardwood floors, like through the room. I'll hear my keys get picked up downstairs,
Hmm.
and we just call it Jerry. We call the ghost Jerry, because there was a guy, Jerome Grimmer was one of the boys that passed away. So like, Jerry, put my keys down, and then you hear like the or you hit the code for the door and then the door won't open. Jerry, stop messing around with the door. You hit the code and then you walk in, that kind of stuff. Stop running around downstairs, Jerry, that kind of stuff. So, but we used to get a lot more activity when we were having people over and doing ghost hunts in the house. I mean, it's bad when like people that that run ghost hunt tours call you and go, "Hey, we're having kind of a slow night. I stop by with my tour bus?" And then I'm like, "No, no, you're not bringing everybody in here. That's not happening." So, yeah, it's pretty funny though that the more you investigate, because people are like, "Hey, can you come check out my house?" I'm like, "Well, it might get worse after that, right? Because you're drawing them out."
Yeah.
So I always tell people like, unless you really want people in your house, you want people investigating.
Mm.
Sometimes if you can handle it and you can coexist, sometimes that might be the best thing to do,
Mhm.
as long as it's not harmful, it's not hurting you or anything like that.
Yeah, and Bobby says they'd send a house on a train car, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. We actually live like pretty close to a what used to be a lumber place. So I believe that that's why they picked this place to put it, because it was, they didn't have to move everything very far. It was
Yeah.
probably delivered right there and then walked over a couple blocks. So very interesting.
So yeah, he reminds me of a story, Bobby, about the train. There's a town right outside of Houston called Old Town Spring, and it's it's like just like all the houses are now like little shops, crystal shops or wedding shops, and just a bunch of different little shops like that. Um, but one of the little ice house is still standing. That's where the train would come, drop off the ice for the town, like for the bars or what have you. But it also doubled as the mortuary because anytime somebody died, they would put a body in there with the ice. So you'd go in there to get ice, and sometimes there might be a body in there. Yeah. So, yeah. So that was a pretty
Yeah.
cool place to go get your ice. Yeah.
There's it's always, somebody lives there, now or something like that. You go in these houses and it's like, oh man, because I mean, obviously with what I do, sometimes, there's been some unfortunate things that have happened in houses and stuff like that on scenes that I've been on. And then you have to go back to that house for something, lighthearted, like, somebody's dog's barking or something. You're sitting there and you're like, do they know what happened here?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. It's just kind of like, it, like, you obviously you can't like sit there and tell them about it, but you remember, because
Right.
of what happened there. So, and people who, might are older, they might remember stuff like what you were just talking about. They might remember, oh, that place used to be this or that. And I think it's fascinating to talk to elderly residents, um, like historical society people, those type of things, because once they're gone, that history is gone. Like that firsthand, account of everything that happened, it's gone.
Yeah.
So we need to, make sure that we're talking to our senior citizens and things like that, just because, passing on that to the next generation.
Yeah. And you bring up an interesting point because I like to talk to older people wherever I'm at because they have such fascinating stories.
Hmm.
Just their own life in general. Doesn't have to be anything crazy, but just real quick, I talked to this older guy, and he was telling me he remembers living. He was in Illinois, and there was a reservation. And he says, he goes, when he was growing up, he goes, I was like a teenager. He goes, I remember like at 10 o'clock at night or whatever, the local sheriff would go and round up the natives and take them back to the reservation because they weren't allowed in town
Oh,
at 10
wow.
o'clock. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And, and he was telling me these stories, I was like, what? And he goes, yeah. I was like, man, I didn't know that. But yeah, that's pretty
Is,
cool.
isn't it crazy that that was going on within the lifetime of somebody who's still with us?
Yeah.
you know, that those type of things were going on.
Mhm.
So it's just, but those stories need to be told,
Mhm.
so people know, kind of stuff not to repeat as well, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
So, but you know, it's it, there's so many different like books that are out there that say, little known things,
Mhm.
oh, Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Mhm.
Is that what, that just popped up on there? That was Kara.
Yeah.
Kara's on History Alive with me. She's one of the
Okay.
cast members of
She's been on my show before.
History Alive. She has a show also on Paraflix called Into the Obscure, where she interviews people and has a lot of really good interviews with different people from the paranormal and other communities. So that's a really good show if you're on Paraflix, if you're subscribed to Paraflix, to watch it.
Yeah, go check it out, guys. You can want to watch it, go check her out. Yeah, she's a cool person either way. Um, and I wanted to ask you, what's some of the best evidence you've captured?
Well, probably the best uh, EVP, because I love EVPs.
Mhm.
I love them because I feel like it's so hard to fake it. As long as you get like something that's like um, you know what I mean, like as long as you get something that's clear, like a Class A EVP. If you get one that someone's like, "Hey, what do you think of that? What do you think
Right.
of that?" And then like you could kind of interpret it to, "Oh, it said my name. Yeah, sure, it said your name."
Mhm.
Class A EVPs, I think, are the best type of evidence. because everybody was being quiet, nobody was saying anything, and all of a sudden there's a voice on there. Where did it come from? It had to come from somewhere. So I actually have um, a recording of a voice saying "Help me," and it was actually captured by my high school group.
Oh wow.
And it is a Class A EVP. It's got and it was taken in the basement of the Little Red Schoolhouse in Hammond, Indiana. So it's very, very clear. I love it whenever we go and do our like paranormal 101 type things, or when I'm introducing new students that are just incoming freshmen, I always play that for them and be like, hey, you know what? You're going to get this 1 out of 100 times
Hmm.
when you're doing this, and you know it. You 1 out of 100 times, but when you do get one, it's exciting. It's worth all the times you didn't get it. You just waited and you were patient and you got a really good thing. So we got another recording of there's a place called um, the or the Memorial Opera House, and it's in Valparaiso. Have you ever heard of Valparaiso, Indiana? It's
Oh,
it,
yeah.
it's in Porter County. That's a little bit east of here, and it was actually built in 1893. You know how they have like VFWs and American Legions. Well, this is a GAR house, so it was built for people that were the Grand Army of the Republic. So these were actually Civil War veterans that it was made for. So they have all these pictures of all these Civil War veterans that are still alive in 1893, and they would go in there and just have a couple drinks upstairs, and then they come and watch an opera. And there was a lot of famous people that were there that did that kind of that performed there. But a place is extremely haunted. We've been there a bunch of times. It's crazy, crazy haunted. And there was a place where you go up into the boxes up on the side, and one of the girls was in there from my high school group. She was in there, and all of a sudden she heard hello, just this hello, like a whisper hello. And then she's like hello, and she's just standing there, and she heard it like live with a zoom, so it actually she could hear it. And then she said, and then it went, get out. And we caught it all on her recording. And so when you think about that could be that doorman that's still standing there at the base of the stairs since 1893, that used to walk people upstairs, is now standing there, and he's saying hello because she walked in, and then she's just messing around standing there. So he's all right, that's enough, get out. You know, So those type of things, to me, it tells a story of who it is who you might be talking to. That's why EVPs are like the biggest thing for me. But we also have a really, really good picture that's from the Roth House that was captured in a window reflection, and it's of a man sitting in a couch where nobody was there, and he's just got his arm up on the side of the couch with it looking off to the side. So that was a really, really good picture that we got at the Roth House as well. So, um, uh, we've over the years we've been collecting tons and tons of equipment, and now we've just gotten into more night vision type stuff and surveillance types cameras. I feel like it's only going to go up from here, the amount of evidence that we're collecting. But we've already got in all these years and stuff like that, we've already got a really, really good amount of interesting evidence that says that there is something else out there.
So when it comes to equipment, what's your favorite piece of equipment?
Probably the digital recorder for the EVP,
Mhm.
for doing EVPs. But if I had to pick something else, I like Mel meters. Mel meters are good because they do so many different things at the same time. But my Zoom is probably my favorite because I can just sit there in a quiet room and you can actually hear live the EVPs coming through,
Okay.
that you don't hear because it just magnifies everything there. What about you? What's your favorite?
Yeah, I like my digital recorder. It's just a
Mhm.
cheapy little Sony,
Yeah.
but we've picked up a lot of stuff. As a matter of fact, like I was telling you, I was doing all the Bigfoot stuff before. doing all the paranormal stuff. And even at this time, I was living in the house that we were talking about before we came on the air. That was my first marriage. Um, we were getting a bunch of activity, like for like 2 3 days in a row, and I finally told my son, I said, "Hey, go get my recorder. The recorder I use when I do my Bigfoot stuff." I said, "Go get my recorder. We're gonna do an EVP session, right?" He says, "Okay." So my daughter, her room was like the most active room in the house. And so I said, we're going to go in there because that night in particular, she was like, she came out of her room. She goes, "Dad, I just saw this black mask go from one corner to the other corner of the room. Nothing there ever like tried to scare us or was like evil, you know. But it was definitely unnerving sometimes and kind of unsettling. Um, so she was kind of shaken up a little bit. So anyway, so that's what we were going to go do the EVP in her room. And we're standing in the living room, like in a huddle, me, my oldest, and my youngest. My son goes to go get the recorder. We didn't know he went to the room by himself to go do an EVP session. And he comes back to the living room. He is white as a ghost. He's like, Dad, you got to hear this." I'm like, "What'd you do?" And he goes, "Because I went to and I did an EVP." I was like, "Who told you to go do that?" You know. So anyway, so he presses play, and you can hear him say, uh, "Is anybody here with us?" And you hear a voice go, "Yeah," just like
Oh,
that. Yeah.
he's going to want to keep that forever because
Oh
that's going to be
yeah.
his
Oh
first
yeah.
EVP.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can
Oh
only imagine. I can probably picture what his face looked like while he's hand. Because he also he knows he's trying to impress you with it too.
right. Yeah.
He's like,
Yeah.
look at this, look what I got. You taught me well with stuff.
Yeah,
So
but I mean, he was white as a ghost. When he played it, we
scary
all kind of got
time.
freaked out. But like I said, we knew nothing there was going to harm us. And like right after
Mhm.
that, I mean, maybe within 30 minutes, my oldest she went back to her room and went to sleep.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. We were never like, well, we're not going in that room again, or we're not going. We were just like, this is just what we live with.
Hmm.
Uh, and it was pretty. It was a pretty cool house, honestly. As far as that activity goes. And we just kind of like said it. We were kind of like, don't scare us or try to scare us, and we
Hmm.
won't try to send you on your way. You can live here. We know it's your house.
Yeah,
And
you
yeah,
just announce that you want to coexist in there.
yeah,
I'm not going to try to remove you,
right,
but I don't want you to scare me out of here either.
yeah,
This is my house now, but I'll let you stay here if you want to.
yeah,
I've had that
yeah,
conversation with the Grimmers too here. So,
yeah,
yeah,
and
I had to
and
be like, yeah, because I found their graves. They're buried in
oh,
Cherville, that's nearby, and then all the kids, the ones that passed away early, they're all there as well.
yeah,
So it's just it's all about going over there and just like it's not all about ghost hunting to me. It's like you
yeah,
have to go in there and kind of pay your respects to. A lot of times when we go to a location, we'll actually go to the cemetery where the people that own the house are, and we'll bring flowers, we'll put them on their grave, things like that. Just because we want to show our respect for them, not just like, oh, we're just here because we want you to do a song and dance for us
right.
at your house. We're there because we actually want to talk to them and see if there's something that they want to tell us that maybe people don't know about them.
Mhm.
It's always very interesting.
Yeah,
So,
when we first moved into that house, we weren't even there 2 3 days, and I was laying in bed, and I felt somebody get on the bed, and at that time we had a boxer. He was a 75-pound dog, and I thought it was him trying to get on the bed because he knew he wasn't supposed to get on the bed. So I sat up real quick. I was going to be like, "Get your ass off the bed!" There was nobody there. And then a few days later, it happened again, and I went out to the kitchen. My family was making breakfast, and I was like, "Hey, this house is haunted." And right away, I got 3 kids and my ex-wife were like, "Yeah, it is." And they all started telling me stuff that has happened.
and they were afraid to talk about it first until
Yeah.
you told them, yeah, this is going to happen. So,
And Bobby says the first honest to gosh paranormal thing that happened to me did not scare me in the least. I was fascinated. Yeah, none of us got scared at all. I can honestly say that. It was actually kind of fun.
you know what I've noticed too is, like, and I don't know if this is your, experience as well, is that, if you go to some place that isn't really well known, you get a lot more activity sometimes. There's these kind of off the beaten path type places that aren't over investigated, and nothing against the places that are, have things going on every day and stuff like that. You can still find stuff there,
Yeah.
but it's those locations that nobody have been to really. I like
Mhm.
going to those places where they're like, like the Gill House in Ohio. They're like, what's the Gill House? I'm like, exactly. That's why I want to go there. And we got probably some of the biggest amount of evidence, the biggest amount of um, activity at that location that we've ever had. So it sometimes, if you're just like, okay, I'm going to get in line for these big places, I'm going to go there, go there, but it doesn't mean that I don't want to go. Like, I'm going to Waverly for the first time in a couple months.
Mhm.
Waverly Sanitarium. We were myself and my associate director Casey Verity. We were asked by Spectral Recon Paranormal to go with them. They had a couple extra spots, and so they're really nice people. It's a nice newer group. We spent a lot of time with another group called Ghouls Night Out. Uh, you
Okay.
get it, Girls Night Out.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. I see them around. I
so
see
they're
them
really
around.
nice, really really nice people, and so they've invited us to come along on some of their stuff as well. Um, we just recently went to the Jim Jones Boyhood Church
Oh
out in
wow, really?
Lynn, Indiana. Yeah, it's kind of like where he was raised in that
Mhm.
church, and there was a lot of cult type stuff that were kind of like he ended up going from there to go start his first church. And it's just this right now. It's a Nazarene church was the last thing it was, and it closed like 3 years ago. But it's got all the little Sunday school rooms and stuff like that. There's a baptismal upstairs with sand behind it, But you find these places in the middle of nowhere,
Mhm.
is where these places are. And we went down the street, and Levi Coffin, one of the people who operated the Underground Railroad, his house was there. So we were able to go stop there as well. So it's all about the side quests as
Right. Yeah.
well, when you go somewhere. So
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it with History Alive. They're talking about the next place that we're going to shoot's going to be out of state.
Mhm.
So we were talking about it the other day with the director Darren Zankin, and he was telling us some of the places that he had in mind. We're gonna do that in July is what it's looking like. So we're really excited about that. Um, the only cast members that I didn't mention were Lee Jacobs and Jeffrey Boardhill. Jeffrey, if you look at like he's kind of the host.
Mhm.
So he's always kind of giving us those quotes, talking about the places that we're going to go, and just a perfect person to be in that position, hosting a series like that. So really, really, I enjoy working with these people on that show. They all have their own thing going on outside of the show. Kara's a nurse at a jail,
Mhm.
actually, and then Amelia is a author and a historian and a storyteller. So it's just everybody's doing something else on their own, or they have their own group, like Jamie and Lee did, do as well. And so we all kind of bring these different things and this different experience to the table in there. And that's why it's called History Alive, because it's about trying to keep that history going. Sort of like what happened with Old Benton County Jail. Like we want to fight for those type of places so that we can keep those places open and we can tell the stories so that people are going to be able to know those things. Even after they knock that building down, we still want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And the people that were there. So that's History Alive is centered on history than the paranormal, but we're actually going back there and trying to see if those people are still there. So it's a I'm looking forward to it very, very much. And I hope that you guys are going to be hearing a lot more about it soon.
And Paranormal Index says can't wait for the show. Yeah. Yeah. We So here recently, when I go out and do my Bigfoot thing, I kind of do the paranormal thing there too, in the woods, in the forest. Because I think there's a lot of paranormal stuff that actually goes on that gets lumped in there with Bigfoot. Some people talk about hearing footsteps. Oh, that's a Bigfoot pacing me. How do you know it's a Bigfoot pacing you? It could be something paranormal, right? Something got thrown at me. why did it have to be a Bigfoot that threw something at you? Might be something paranormal, right? Or even like the voices. People hear voices and they're like, "That's the samurai chatter is what they call it." But it could be something paranormal also. Uh, so I've been kind of incorporating that when I go out there, and I'll do some EVPs when I'm out there. I haven't captured anything, but I've had friends that have captured stuff and heard stuff. Like a friend of mine named Sean was actually out putting a recorder up, and he heard audibly in his ear something go, psst, just right next to his head. He turned around and goes, "There's nobody there," Um, and I had
It's
another friend. He for whatever reason, the only thing he captured on his uh, recorder that night was someone said nobody, and that was all that was said. Nobody. I don't know what that meant, but that's all that he got was just nobody. You know.
a lot of the words that you get like on a novelist or things like that, sometimes later on
Hmm.
it'll kind of make it makes sense of that. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like we'll have people that'll go home and they'll say, oh my gosh, I just had this happen, and it really corresponds with what that person was trying to tell me through the box.
Right.
Stuff like that. So um, it's like, sometimes you have to like sound things out. It almost is like reading Shakespeare sometimes, where there's a lot of like metaphors and things like that, because maybe that's the way that they talk, or maybe that's the only word that they could find to be able to put through. So when you sound it all out, I mean, sometimes we'll get on a novelist evening to remember. I'll never forget. I got that one time, and it was like it was really really busy that night, a lot of activity, but it's like, what are the chances of an obelisk saying evening to remember when these are supposed to be words that are chosen
Right.
by these things? And then it said students and club. It's like sometimes there's got to be more to it
Hmm.
than just random words popping up on there. And a lot of
Right.
people are like, oh, that thing's garbage. And it's like, well, there's something to it. In some locations, when you go to really, really haunted locations, you can actually get things like that. And it says that it isn't all garbage and BS.
Yeah. I had a friend of mine. He had one. And where was the witch trial? Salem was right where they
Hmm.
had the burn. Right. He got on his obelisk witches and the burn and the fire. Yeah. So that was
Yes.
pretty cool.
So
Yeah.
that's a little bit more than just a coincidence,
Yeah.
you know, when it comes to that. So, I mean, I like to, make sure that, you don't just walk in a room, oh, my K2 meter's going off. There's ghosts in here.
Right.
You're going in there and, okay, we have several different pieces of equipment that are going off, that are setting that off. You know what I mean? That are confirming each other.
Right.
So, otherwise it's a little bit more difficult to just say, okay, well, this was something because this went off. It could totally be somebody keying up a radio that's going to set off a REM pod or something like that. So, we just like to try to use multiple items. So I mean, at first everybody starts off with, and like you said about the digital recorder, you don't need $150, $200, $300 digital recorder to get an EVP. You don't need that. I caught that with a $20 Olympus,
Yeah.
that really good A+ one.
Yeah.
It was $20 for that thing. So if people think that they have to go out and buy all this real super expensive equipment, I mean, that comes later. It's kind of part of the illness. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's kind of the obsession with getting equipment. You start eventually. I'll be watching a show, and part of the reason why I watch the shows anymore is I'm like, what's that? What's that piece of equipment? And then I'll pause it, and then I'll start looking it up. Because I'm like, I don't have that yet. I want to buy it. I want to be able to get it. So, um, and the kids love using the new stuff. I started off with one K2 meter, but then when you have 12 kids that are going to group, you got to have 12 K2 meters. So everybody has something. So I think that's how I've kind of grown my collection of stuff to be pretty large. Actually, we've pretty much got it.
Yeah.
We've got
Yeah.
one of everything, just about.
Yeah. Between all my Bigfooting and now the paranormal stuff, I've got some crazy equipment now. And uh, but it's like I said, it's something fun, and I'd rather spend it on this than going out at night, and.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, we did decide at uh, one of the meetings with my associate directors, Brian Greer's the other one. We just went. We like to go out like to mom and pop style, like you know, possibly haunted or in historical buildings. Like to go to eat, and we'll go sit there and just like talk, about different things that are coming up. And it turned into where you know we're sitting there talking about stuff, and we're like, you know what, one time a year we want to just go on a history thing, where it has nothing really to do with ghost hunting. We just want to be able to go during the day, and that's going to be places like Gettysburg. Like I don't want to be sleeping all day when I'm at Gettysburg, because of having the paranormal hangover from the night before of staying up all night. But go on a ghost tour, go on those type of things. But I want to be able to enjoy that history, and walk the battlefield, pay your respects to the people, things like that. I want to be able to do that too, and not be sleeping during the day, so to speak.
Yeah, I hear you.
So,
Well, Mr. Pete, man, we're coming up at the end of the show here. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about any of your social media or any channels you want to promote or anything you've got coming up that you want to promote.
well, we've got some of these places are already, taken. Though we have enough, we already have a lot of people there. But um, Howard County Masonic Lodge, we're going to be doing that next weekend, so that'll be great. And then I'm doing Billy Creek Village and Indiana State Sanitarium in June. Like I said, Waverly Hills with Spectral Recon in July. We're going to do Madison Seminary in September, as well as the Old Licking County Jail. As for events, uh, not this Saturday, but the Saturday after that, we're going to have a table at the Ghosts and Outlaws event at Old Lake County Jail. That's being run by Nick Carboni and Bree
Okay.
Hollingshead. I'm sure you know them. And Tim T Dog Coomer is going to be there as well. So they're going to be running that. We're going to have a table there, and I know they're running a vendor fair during the day. I believe that's free to get into, just to go over to the vendor fair. But then if you want to go on the VIP ghost hunt later, they have tickets for sale for that, and we have links for that on our social media. Again, mine's Pete Ghrist. I welcome anybody that's paranormal related, that wants to follow my page. We put a lot of information out on there. Also, Northwest Indiana Paranormal. I both of those pages are all Instagram and Facebook. So you can follow on there. The Griffith High School Paranormal Society has both social media, but we only give access to that to the students and their parents, just for safety reasons. But other than that, uh, Freak Out at the Fowler, that's going to be in October. We're looking forward to that. And then I'm going to be on a panel. Actually, it was asked by Nick Carboni and Bree Hollingshead. They're doing a thing called Mysteries of the Fort, a symposium in Fort Wayne at the beginning of November, and I'm going to be on a panel with other first responders at that. So I'm really looking forward to spending the weekend in Fort Wayne in November. So
Oh, that's very cool, man. You're gonna be a very, very busy man.
I like to be busy.
Yeah.
I see an open day, and it drives my girlfriend nuts. But like I see an open, I try to plug something in there. You know what I mean? Open date, and I'm like, okay, hey, you know what? Let's do a meetup. Let's all go out for dinner or something. I
Yeah.
just I don't like to really sit and be idle. I like to be busy.
Yeah. Same here. Same here, man. We get most of our stuff done before noon on Saturdays and Sundays. You know, we're up pretty early doing stuff. So yeah, I hear you. Well, cool, Pete, man. Thanks for doing the show, man. I really appreciate it. You made the show easy. I could have probably went and got dinner and came back, and you'd have been doing great all by yourself, man. So I do appreciate that. Um,
Thanks for having me on.
yeah, man, dude. If I can ever do anything for you, you wanted me to promote anything for you, just shoot me the link. I'll be
Awesome.
happy to share it, man. And for everyone else, be on next Monday. I don't know who I have. I never know who I have. So I will see you guys on Monday. Yeah, he's that paranormal index is busy, keeps you out of trouble. It sure does. But yeah, I'll see you guys next Monday. Pete, don't go anywhere. Hold on. Everyone else, you guys have a good night. Thanks for doing a great job in the chat. You guys are awesome.